The section that I read is the section in which he introduces the metaphor of the leaves of grass. A child asked me, "What is the grass?" fetching it to me, and I'm getting chills just thinking about it, because to me this is the whole Whitman universe, and there is no difference between what Whitman is saying and who we are if we are following what he's doing. Right? He's talking about the grass as an incarnation of the voices of the dead, an incarnation of the life of the dead, that just goes on, and it's
literally,
it's
right?
Yeah,
it's the physical.
Yes. Yeah, it's physical. It's not just metaphysical. It's physical, and it's the point at which he introduces this idea of the immortality, and it just lifts. The whole poem up, and it lifts you with it too, if you stay with him.
This metaphor.
Walk this day and night with me, and you shall possess the secret. Right.
And I wonder, since you read it, I always I absolutely agree that this is the moment at which that metaphor of the grass really emerges, and the timelessness of this poem is absolutely
and
established.
Leaf, right, and the leaf is also the metaphor for the pages of the book.
Yes,
which are the pages of the spoken words of those who are gone.
That's right, since books keep those words, right? Books are the leaves of books, keep the words of those who are gone, including Whitman. No, it's very beautiful. It's also the section where where the speaker plays a teacher, right? The teacher to a child, and you read that so beautifully. I'm wondering about that child.
But the speaker is also discovering as he's looking at the grass. He says, "I don't know what it is any more than the child does."
What a weird position for a teacher,
right? So then he just meditates on it. It becomes a meditation. I suppose it could be this. I suppose it's that, and the meaning just expands.
It's fundamental to Whitman's. From the very beginning, he says, "This is not. You're not learning just from me."
Right.
That's sort of fundamental to his ethos, right?
That's right.
Is that his educational position is one voice of many. And he precisely speaks against the idea of being
an authority
figure.
Yeah,
he's no guru.
Right? That's right. And teaching, right, in a certain way, teaching in Whitman's, as he models it, becomes about guessing, right? Yes. A teacher is a guesser.
Actually, I think it's about finding your relationship to life, to each other. It's about the immediacy of that relationship, not receiving it through books and forms and stereotypes and categories, but just being present to life.
And the immediate, that's so beautiful. It's about that immediate encounter, but also it's a human encounter, right? We learn these things from two people figuring it out together, one old, one young, and yet, as you point out, the old one with no special authority.
And in fact, probably learning as much from the young, or some from the young in the same way. It's very reciprocal. And I think 7 takes it beyond that specific metaphor of the teacher and the student and the grass coming up, and that sort of very physically being the idea of regeneration into sort of conceptual regeneration. It's all about the fact that birth is no better than death, and death is no better than birth. These are all cyclical, circular, regenerative moments. And then he takes that sort of theme to all the different types of, let's say if we were to say good, bad, different sides of binaries, right? Old, young, men, women, lovers of men, lovers of women. And he starts to unpack those and bring them apart and say, we're all the same. We're all immortal. We're all part of this, coming from this space, from this blade of grass. And I think that 7 and 6 kind of sit together in that way.
Yes, as you two stand together, as you two stand together. Also, it's also though, Kara, as you point out, this is one of the first moments in the poem where Whitman begins to educate us to open ourselves to things that are really hard, right? To the fact of death, not just as a metaphor, but as a real
part
thing,
of life.
as a real part of life, and he begins to suggest its regenerative possibilities. And so those binaries that so often include the bad one,
right,
or
that the problem,
the problem with binaries is there's always the good one and the bad one. And he's reintroducing, in a way, binaries as they couple a little bit, right?
Yes.
Just as he, in 5, that comes right before
Yes.
your readings, body and soul lie on the grass together, making love.
Right.
Right? We traditionally think of the body as inferior to the soul. Here, death and life, in a way, are lying together, adult and child.
We were speaking earlier and talking about the paradox of our opening lines, the I and the everyone, the whole. And Leaves of Grass is emblematic of that very paradox, in that here we have a blade of grass, and here we have a lawn, a field. We have the micro and the macro, and without the micro, you don't have the macro. That doesn't mean that the micro isn't important. Doesn't mean that the macro is not. So you need both of those pieces to have the whole, and you can enjoy the leaf or the blade, or you can step back. You can let it all wash over you, as you sometimes have to with Whitman. Yeah.
Right? Observing the sphere of summer grass, right? The grass is just the element you happen to be in, or the object of your attention.
And you take it all in, and maybe you're changed as a whole being. You're transformed by what you took in from those individual leaves.
I mean, sitting now down in the Leaves of Grass, I'm looking at the grass. I'm looking at the individual leaves as we are looking at the individual components of this piece of work without going too far out on a limb. I've also been trying to see if there's any 4-leaf clovers in here, but I've been heretofore unsuccessful.
So is he rewriting the Book of Nature? Is this Whitman's own sort of foray into, the historicity of literature, and this is my offering, and these are the leaves of my book, but the leaves of my book are drawn from nature and are from nature.
It's also about as humble as you can get, right? And you have to be pretty far down, and as we're experiencing, to really know it. It underlies everything. And he says somewhere that, wherever there's earth and wherever there is water, that's grass is there. So it's this incredibly elemental and democratic thing.
It's a bit too, just analogously speaking, the difference between knowledge and wisdom. Once you put all those leaves together, you're not looking at, as Shannon said, the blade of grass, but how they interact with each other. And the meandering through the poem is to make sure that you experience the bride and the opium eater and the prostitute and the president, that once you are able to, as Jeff said earlier, weave those things together so that they unfold simultaneously, you know how they relate to each other and how to make use of them, as opposed to just identifying them.
And so this time, as I was thinking about these lines, I was hearing that fetching it to me with full hands and wondering what answer one could give to that action, right? What is and wondering about the way in which the question and the act of fetching with full hands, what relationship they bear to each other. I mean, the mysteries. This section draws us into kind of the mystery of knowing, right? The mystery of knowing. How do we know?
Yeah, it's the mystery of knowing, and it's the mystery of composing as well. He's not quite sure what he wants to call the grass. He has no idea what to tell this child. The anaphora becomes, I guess, and then it may be. There's something very tentative about Whitman in this section that I find very poignant. He's not sure what the metaphor is for the grass. He doesn't know how to answer it, but he tries in so many ways. It's very endearing, I find.
I did a very quick search. I mean, just, paging through. And I was wondering how often he mentions grass later, after the 6th song that he's in. And it's at the beginning of the 31st that he says, "I believe a leaf of grass is no less than the journey work of the stars." And it seems to me that you're right. I think he's tentative here, but then he returns at that point and makes a direct statement about what he really believes it is. I think the entire poem is is a circular device, that things keep returning. There's a sort of a mantra here that, you return back to everything at some point. You keep repeating it.
In the circularity thing also, this reminds me a lot of Wordsworth and Child is Father to the Man, and the graves later, and the circularity of, I think the idea of knowledge that he plays with in the whole thing, but it reminds me a lot in this section, is whether it's intuitive knowledge that comes from generations and from the child, or it's literal scientific knowledge, which is what the child is asking for. But I think the idea is also that the child doesn't know that he already knows it.
And what about interpersonal knowledge?
Yeah.
Listing different kinds of knowledge, intuitive knowledge, scientific knowledge, tactile knowledge. I just interrupted you, sorry. But then there's also the knowledge that comes of the question and the answer, right?
Yeah.
The knowledge of that occasion of teaching, and of the knowledge we feel accountable for the.
I really like the question and answer kind of format. So there's the initial question and there's the contemplation. It may be, but he does arrive somewhere, and he says, the smallest sprouts show there really is no death. So perhaps it's something about immortalization. I don't know of himself, of what he's talking about, but I guess, when you die, you go back in the earth and you create new life, and so he's sort of contemplating this, this weaving, I guess, that goes on forever.
The whole idea of a child coming to him seeking knowledge, and his reply to that is that the child already basically knows what he knows, which is like, the human condition of trying to explain the unexplainable, which is what we're always doing when we're writing books, or the reason why science exists in the first place is we're trying to solve these riddles that exist in the universe. And I think he's questioning, his place in this. Like, is it my responsibility to come up with this answer, or can I accept what is, and just come to terms with existence, and that it is what it is? And just as well as I know, to this child, that grass, basically asking what is grass is asking what is life. Why do we exist? Why is it alive? Why do things die? Why do things go through this natural cycle, and why is it common to everyone? And it's an answer, if it's religious, that you would ask God, and some people go to God for that answer. And I think that kind of correlates with what you're saying. Is he writing a book on nature now, or is he just saying, as human beings, can we come to accept things we don't understand?